The evening air was biting, slicing through Mia's thin jacket as she stood outside the gleaming glass doors of a high-end boutique. It was only 7 p.m., but the sky had already darkened, the streetlights casting long shadows across the empty sidewalk. The city, so alive and full of people just a few blocks away, felt like another world here, one of wealth, luxury, and untouchable dreams. Mia's stomach growled again, louder this time, as her eyes instinctively darted to the bakery across the street. The warm, inviting glow of the bread oven filled the window, the golden loaves just out of reach. She'd always been drawn to that bakery, but today, hunger gnawed at her like never before. It wasn't just a craving, it was desperation. The last few days had been the hardest of her life. The kind of days that forced you to face the raw edges of your existence. No family. No support. Just one decision after another, each one leading to a place where hope seemed more and more distant. A month ago, she'd been doing her best to scrape by, working odd jobs, sleeping on a friend's couch. Now, she was on the streets. Her phone had died hours ago. The last $5 she'd had in her wallet had gone to buying a warm drink that was long gone. The thought of a hot meal felt like a distant fantasy. And then, in a fleeting moment of madness, she had decided to approach him. The man inside the store was everything she was not, wealthy, well-dressed, and comfortable in his world. He stood behind the counter, his sharp suit and perfect posture a stark contrast to Mia's frazzled appearance. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his eyes had that detached, almost bored look of someone who had seen it all. Mia couldn't wait any longer. She had already waited for what felt like hours outside that bakery, watching as people walked by with bags full of fresh bread, enjoying their simple pleasures, while she stood here, empty-handed and starving. With one final breath, she crossed the street and stood at the entrance of the boutique. The polished floors of the store shone through the glass, and the elegant displays of designer shoes and accessories taunted her with their perfection. The thought crossed her mind to turn away, to go somewhere, anywhere else. But her feet were frozen in place. The need to speak, to ask for help, consumed her. She was humiliated by the very idea of what she was about to do, but hunger twisted her insides like nothing else. She pressed her palm against the door, the cold metal feeling like a wall between her and her last chance. She knocked lightly on the glass. The man behind the counter looked up, his face an impassive mask. His gaze flicked to the door, then back to the shelves. He made no move to acknowledge her, but then his eyes narrowed in curiosity. Mia stood there, her hands trembling, unsure of what to say. Her words felt heavy in her mouth, but she forced them out, her voice barely a whisper. "Excuse me, sir. I need bread. I don't have anything to offer, but, would you trade shoes for it?" The words hung in the air, ridiculous and desperate. She wanted to shrink into the ground, wanted to disappear, but she couldn't. She had made a choice, and now it was out there. She had asked. She had put herself in a place where pride no longer mattered, where hunger came first. The man didn't respond at first. He just stared at her, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. It was as though he was trying to assess her, trying to figure out if she was genuine or just another beggar. She could feel the judgment behind his cold gaze, but it didn't matter anymore. Mia shifted uncomfortably, waiting for something, anything. A sign that he would either tell her to leave or laugh her off, or maybe, just maybe, help her. The seconds stretched into eternity. She felt her heartbeat in her throat, her legs like jelly beneath her. She had nowhere else to go, nothing else to do but wait for his answer. And then, almost imperceptibly, his expression softened. He stepped out from behind the counter, his polished shoes clicking against the tile floor as he made his way toward the door. He opened it just wide enough for her to slip inside. Mia didn't hesitate. She stepped through the door, the warmth of the store wrapping around her like a blanket. She had never felt more out of place. The smell of expensive perfume, leather, and polished wood filled her senses, a far cry from the cold, empty street she had just come from. "You're serious, aren't you?" the man asked. His voice was calm, almost amused, but there was something behind it that she couldn't quite place. Mia nodded, her eyes on the ground. She couldn't meet his gaze. "Why shoes?" he asked, his tone suddenly curious. "Why not ask for cash? Or food directly?" She hesitated. "I thought, shoes might be easier to give. And I don't know. I just didn't know what else to do. I can't go on like this. Please. I just need something." He studied her for a long time, as if he were trying to gauge the truth in her words. Then, with a sigh, he motioned toward a chair in the corner of the store. "Sit," he said, his voice softer now. Mia didn't argue. She walked over and sank down onto the plush chair, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest. The billionaire, she assumed he was, judging by his appearance, moved silently around the store, gathering items from various shelves. She watched him, trying to decipher his intentions. Was he really going to help her? Or was this just some cruel joke, a way to show her how insignificant she was? Minutes later, he returned with a small box in hand. He opened it, revealing a pair of shoes, expensive, sleek, designer shoes. They were beautiful. But Mia could only stare at them, uncertain of what she was supposed to do with them. "Are you going to take them?" he asked, his voice more serious now. Mia looked up at him. Her heart pounding. "But I only have one request. The bread. I need bread. That's all." The man raised an eyebrow. "So, you really want to trade shoes for bread?" Mia's throat tightened, but she held his gaze. "I don't care about anything else. Just bread." The man's expression shifted. He took a step closer, his gaze now penetrating, as though searching her very soul. "You're not what you seem." Mia didn't know what to make of his words, but she didn't have the strength to question him. She was too tired, too hungry. Finally, he nodded and walked to the back of the store, disappearing through a door Mia hadn't noticed before. She sat there, frozen, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Minutes later, he returned, but with something entirely unexpected. It wasn't bread. It wasn't cash. It was a key, a small, silver key, and a note. Mia stared at it, confused. She didn't know what to say, what to do. She was on the verge of asking, but before she could, the man spoke again. "You don't know what you've just asked for. And you don't know what's about to happen next." The words struck her with the force of a thunderclap, but before she could process them, he turned and walked away, leaving her with the key and the note. As she left the store that night, holding the strange key in her hand, a sense of unease settled in her chest. She didn't know what it meant. She didn't know what it would lead to. But somehow, deep down, she knew that this was just the beginning of something far bigger than she could imagine. Mia's mind raced as she walked down the quiet street, the silver key in her pocket feeling unnervingly heavy. The bakery across the street still emitted the rich scent of fresh bread, but it no longer seemed to matter. The warmth of the boutique and the bewildering encounter with the man who had given her the key were all that filled her thoughts. She didn't understand. None of it made sense. What had just happened? She had come in asking for bread, for the simplest of things, and walked out with a key and a cryptic note. It didn't sit right in her gut. For a moment, Mia considered returning to the store. She thought about knocking again, asking the man what he meant by his words. But she stopped herself. She had no idea who he was or what he might be capable of. The look in his eyes when he handed her the key had unsettled her. It was as if he knew something she didn't, a secret she had unknowingly become a part of. The silver key felt cold against her skin, even in her pocket. It was a small thing, delicate but unyielding, almost like it belonged to another world, another life. The note that accompanied it was just as strange, written in neat, elegant handwriting: "Find the door. It is not what it seems, but it will change everything." Mia's fingers brushed against the edge of the note. She unfolded it again, trying to make sense of the words. Find the door. What did that mean? Was it a literal door? Or something metaphorical, something deeper? She had no answers, only more questions. But there was one thing she was certain of: she wasn't going to be able to ignore this. She had no choice but to find out what it all meant. As the cold night air bit at her skin, Mia decided to head back to the park where she'd been spending most of her nights. It was quiet, isolated, and it gave her the time to think, or at least, she hoped it would. The park was barely a block away, nestled between two apartment buildings, a forgotten patch of green in a city that had long outgrown the need for such spaces. It was here she had spent the last few days, curled up in one of the old wooden benches, trying to escape the reality of her situation. Tonight, though, the familiar surroundings felt strangely alien. The key in her pocket burned against her, and the silence around her seemed thicker than usual. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting the man from the store to appear behind her. But the streets were empty, just as they had been for the last few hours. Once at the park, Mia sat on one of the benches, pulling the key from her pocket and inspecting it. There was no engraving, no symbols, just a simple silver key. It was as though it could open any door, yet the only thing she knew for sure was that it felt important. But to what? As she sat there, trying to clear her head, she heard footsteps approaching. She tensed instinctively, her senses sharpening. But when she turned, she saw nothing but an old man walking his dog. The unease that had settled in her chest didn't fade, though. It lingered, growing stronger, as if it were feeding off the mystery that had suddenly taken hold of her life. Without thinking, Mia stood up, slipping the key back into her pocket, and began walking toward the street. Her feet carried her forward, as though pulled by some invisible force. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she couldn't stay in the park. She needed to figure this out. She needed answers. The streets were quieter now, the usual noise of city life dulled under the weight of her thoughts. As she passed familiar shops and cafes, she found herself drawn toward the alley where she had seen the man walk to earlier. Her feet took her there almost without her realizing it. The alley was narrow and dark, the dim streetlights casting long shadows on the walls. She hesitated at the entrance, the weight of the key in her pocket pressing against her as if urging her to go forward. She stepped inside, the sound of her footsteps echoing against the brick walls. The alleyway seemed endless, but she didn't stop. She knew that somehow, this was where she needed to be. At the end of the alley, there was a large metal door. It wasn't ornate or decorated in any way, just a simple door, unmarked, standing alone in the middle of the wall. It looked like it had been there for years, maybe even decades. The paint was chipped and faded, and rust had started to creep in around the edges. Mia froze. The key. The note. Everything led here. Her heart raced as she walked toward the door. She could barely believe what she was doing, but some part of her felt certain that this was no coincidence. This was the door she had been told to find. But what would happen if she opened it? Taking a deep breath, she pulled the key from her pocket and slid it into the lock. The cold metal felt even colder now, but the lock clicked easily, as though it had been waiting for her all along. The door creaked open with a soft groan, revealing a dimly lit room beyond. It was small, cramped, and empty, except for a single table in the center. The room smelled musty, like it hadn't been used in years. Mia stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. Her eyes darted around the room, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. There was nothing extraordinary about the place, nothing that screamed mystery or danger. It was just a small, forgotten room. But then she saw it, a small piece of paper on the table, almost as if it had been waiting for her. She walked toward it, her hands shaking as she reached for it. The note was simple, written in the same elegant handwriting as the first. It read, "You are being watched. Be careful who you trust." Mia's stomach dropped. The words were a warning, but from whom? And why? Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her, footsteps, soft but unmistakable. She spun around, her heart leaping in her throat. Standing in the doorway was the man from the boutique. He wasn't dressed in his sharp suit anymore. He was in a dark coat, his expression unreadable. The same look from before, that cold, calculating gaze that made Mia feel like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Mia's breath caught in her throat. Did you really think it would be this easy?" he interrupted. His eyes flickered to the note in her hand, then back to her face. "Did you think you could just follow the trail without consequences?" Mia took a step back, unsure of what to say. The note in her hand felt like it weighed a ton now, like it was suffocating her. "Who are you?" she finally managed to ask. "What is this? Why are you doing this?" The man's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I didn't give you the key because I expected you to solve a mystery. I gave it to you because you need to see the truth." "The truth?" she repeated, her voice trembling. He nodded. "The truth about yourself. About what you're capable of. And about the choices you'll soon have to make." Mia's mind spun. She didn't know what to think, what to believe. Every answer she thought she had was slipping through her fingers like sand. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Because you're not who you think you are. And this," he gestured to the room around them, "is just the beginning." Mia's heart raced. She didn't understand, but one thing was clear: whatever was happening, it was far bigger than she had imagined. And she was about to be drawn deeper into a web of mystery and danger she hadn't been prepared for. Mia's heart pounded in her chest as the man stood in front of her, his words hanging in the air like an unsettling truth she wasn't yet ready to grasp. The darkness of the small room seemed to close in around her, amplifying her confusion and fear. Who was this man, and why was he speaking as if he knew her? "You said I'm not who I think I am," Mia whispered, her voice trembling. "What do you mean by that? What are you trying to tell me?" The man remained silent for a moment, as if considering her question carefully. His gaze never wavered, his eyes sharp and intense, scanning her as if he were analyzing every thought in her mind. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold but purposeful. "You are part of something much larger than yourself. Something you've been unknowingly tied to for years. And now, you've reached a point where you can either choose to accept that truth or turn away." Mia's head spun, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her mind was racing, trying to process what he had just said, but nothing made sense. Her whole life, her struggles, her pain, her desperation, none of it felt real anymore. Was there really some grand truth that had been hidden from her all this time? And why her? The man stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "The key you hold is not just a key to a door. It's a key to understanding who you are and what you are capable of. But you have to decide if you're willing to walk through the door, or if you'll turn your back on it all." Mia took a shaky step backward, the weight of the situation finally hitting her. "I don't understand. What is this place? What do you want from me?" The man's lips curled into a faint smile, but it wasn't one of reassurance. It was a smile filled with quiet knowledge, as if he knew something she didn't. "I don't want anything from you, Mia. But you are about to be thrust into a world where you'll have to make choices that will change everything. The question is, are you ready?" The room felt suffocating now, the walls closing in on her. Her thoughts were jumbled, her emotions a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and disbelief. She had come here looking for answers, looking for something simple, a way to survive. But what she was now facing was something far bigger, far more dangerous, than she had ever imagined. "I don't even know who you are," Mia said, her voice growing more desperate. "How do you know my name? How do you know anything about me?" The man's expression softened for just a moment, almost as if he were reluctant to continue. But then his face hardened again, and he took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "I know everything about you, Mia," he said quietly. "Everything that's happened to you, everything you've been through. I know your story because it's the same story as many others. You just don't realize it yet. You think you're alone, but you're not." Mia stumbled back, her mind racing. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" Before the man could respond, a loud noise echoed from the door behind them. Mia spun around, her breath catching in her throat. The door, the one she had opened with the key, was now slowly creaking closed. But it wasn't the door that caught her attention. It was what was standing on the other side. A figure, tall and shadowed, stood just beyond the door. The dim light from the room barely illuminated its silhouette, but Mia could see enough to know that it wasn't human. The figure was cloaked in darkness, its form tall and angular, its movements smooth and deliberate. It was watching her, waiting for something. She turned to the man, her voice barely a whisper. What is that?" The man's expression darkened. "You shouldn't have opened that door, Mia. Not yet. But now that you have, there's no going back. You're involved in something much bigger than you realize. And that thing standing outside the door? It's only the beginning." The figure in the doorway didn't move, but Mia could feel its presence. It was as though it was studying her, sizing her up. Her chest tightened, and the air around her grew colder. "What do you mean?" she managed to ask, her voice barely audible. "You've unlocked a path," the man replied, his tone grave. "A path that was never meant to be opened. And now, you've drawn the attention of forces beyond your comprehension. Forces that are ancient, powerful, and relentless. They are watching you, Mia. They are waiting." Mia's mind raced. What was he saying? She had never been a part of anything like this. She was just a girl who had been struggling to survive, trying to make her way in the world. She wasn't some key player in a grand, dangerous scheme. She couldn't be. But the figure outside the door, the way it was watching her, the way the man was speaking, told her otherwise. Before she could speak again, the man moved swiftly, blocking her view of the doorway. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low and urgent. "They are coming. You have no idea how much danger you're in right now." Mia took a step back, her mind reeling. She could feel the fear building inside her, threatening to consume her. This wasn't just about the key anymore. It was about her life, her future, her very survival. She had walked into something she didn't understand, something that was bigger than her. "I don't know what you want from me," Mia said, her voice shaking. "But I'm not a part of this. I just wanted to survive. To make it through another day." The man's gaze softened for a moment, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know you didn't ask for any of this. But now that you found the key, you can't ignore it. It's a part of you, Mia. You are a part of it. And if you want to survive, if you want to understand what's really happening, you have to keep moving forward." Mia shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know how. I don't know what to do." The man took a deep breath, his eyes locking with hers. "I'll help you. But you have to trust me. You have to understand that you're not alone in this. And you can't run from it." Mia's mind screamed for escape, but her feet wouldn't move. Something deep inside her told her that no matter how much she wanted to run, she couldn't. She was already too far gone. The figure outside the door took a step forward, its presence growing more imposing. Mia could feel the cold air around her intensifying, a chill creeping into her bones. It was as if the very room was shifting, bending under the weight of whatever force was entering. "Mia," the man said softly, his voice steady. "You need to face this head-on. There's no turning back now." Mia's heart pounded in her chest, and for the first time, she truly understood the gravity of what was happening. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something much bigger, something that threatened to swallow her whole. And she was about to find out exactly what that was. The room felt suffocating, the coldness seeping into Mia's skin, making her bones ache. She couldn't understand it, couldn't grasp what was happening. The man who stood in front of her, so calm and collected, was speaking like he knew everything. But how could he? She was just a girl who had asked for help, nothing more. And yet, everything had changed. The figure at the door was still there, its presence undeniable, like a shadow that stretched out over her, consuming the space. It hadn't moved, but Mia could feel its eyes on her, watching, waiting. Her heart raced in her chest, and she could almost hear her pulse pounding in her ears. "You need to face this," the man's voice broke through her racing thoughts. "The darkness is already here, Mia. And if you don't step forward, you'll be consumed by it." She wanted to scream, to run, to throw herself out the door and escape, but her feet wouldn't move. Her body refused to listen to her frantic thoughts. There was no escaping it now. The key had been unlocked, and with it, her fate had been sealed. But she didn't know what to do. How could she face something she didn't understand? How could she face the unknown when everything she thought she knew about herself was being ripped away? Mia turned to the man, her voice breaking. "What's happening to me? Why can't I just go home? Why is this happening?" The man stepped closer. His gaze softening, though there was still a hard edge to his expression. "You're already home, Mia. You're in the place where everything begins. You've been chosen for something far greater than yourself. This is your chance to make a choice." Mia shook her head, unable to process what he was saying. "I don't want any part of this. I just wanted help. I just wanted to survive. I don't know who I am anymore." The man's eyes flashed with something, maybe sympathy, maybe pity, but it was gone in an instant. "You're more than you think you are. But if you keep running from who you really are, it will catch up with you. It always does." The figure at the door shifted, and the air grew even colder. Mia flinched, instinctively drawing closer to the man in front of her, though she didn't know if he could protect her from whatever was out there. Was he even on her side? "Do you see it now?" the man asked, his voice low. "Do you understand why you can't run from this? It's not just a choice. It's destiny. You have something inside you, Mia, something powerful. But it will take everything you've got to face it." "I don't want this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never asked for this. I don't want to be part of whatever this is." "You've already made that choice when you walked into this place," he said quietly. "Now it's time to face what comes next." Mia could feel her chest tighten, the air around her thick with fear and confusion. She was trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. The truth, whatever it was slipping further and further out of her reach. But one thing was clear, the man, though cryptic and distant, was right about one thing. There was no turning back. The figure at the door took a step forward, its presence growing. The cold seemed to intensify, and Mia's breath caught in her throat. It was now or never. She had to do something. "I need to understand," Mia said, her voice steadying despite the fear that gripped her. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The man hesitated before answering, his expression unreadable. I am someone who's seen what happens when people ignore the truth. I've been through what you're going through now. I know how it feels to be lost, to feel as if the world is spinning out of control. But I've also seen what happens when you finally accept who you are. Mia took a step back, trying to process his words. But what does any of this have to do with me? Why me? What is the truth? The truth is that you're not just anyone, Mia, the man replied, his tone unyielding. You're a key player in something much larger than yourself. And the sooner you realize that, the better. It's the only way you'll survive. Survive. The word echoed in Mia's mind, sending a chill down her spine. She had thought survival was about getting by, about making it through the next day, the next hour. But now, it seemed survival meant something much more complex. Something dangerous. Survival isn't just about food and shelter, the man said, as though reading her thoughts. It's about facing the truth. About embracing what's coming, even when you're terrified. Because if you don't, it will destroy you. Mia's heart thudded in her chest. She couldn't breathe. She wanted to run, to escape this terrifying reality, but there was nowhere to go. Her mind was spinning, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't make sense of it all. The figure at the door moved again, its shadow stretching across the room, swallowing the light. Mia's fear heightened as she realized it wasn't just standing there anymore. It was coming closer. Mia, the man said sharply, grabbing her arm. You need to move. Now. Before she could react, the man pulled her toward the back of the room. She stumbled, her legs shaking with the effort to keep up. Her heart raced, her head spinning. Everything was happening so fast, and she didn't know what to believe anymore. How had her life turned into this? How had everything she knew slipped away so quickly? Where are we going? Mia asked, her voice a mixture of fear and confusion. To face the truth, the man said simply. We have no choice now. Mia didn't have time to respond before they reached a narrow staircase that led down into the darkness. She could feel the cold air creeping up her spine as they descended, each step feeling heavier than the last. The silence around them was oppressive, and Mia's mind raced, filled with questions that had no answers. What is this place? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. It's a place for the chosen, the man replied. A place where those who have the key come to learn what they must face. To learn who they really are. But I didn't choose this, Mia protested, her voice breaking. I didn't ask for any of this. You don't get to choose, Mia, the man said quietly. Not anymore. The stairs seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness closing in around them. Mia's fear intensified with each step they took, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into the heart of something dangerous. Something far beyond her understanding. Finally, they reached the bottom, and the man stopped in front of a large metal door. The air here was colder, the silence more deafening. This is it, he said, his voice steady. The next step. You need to make your choice now. Walk through that door, and you'll know the truth. But be warned, Mia. The truth is not always what we expect. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She didn't want to go through that door. She didn't want to face whatever was waiting on the other side. But the man was right. She had no choice. The truth was waiting for her. And there was no escaping it. Mia stood frozen in front of the door. The chill in the air had intensified, and her breath came out in shaky clouds, merging with the fog that seemed to fill the space around them. Every part of her wanted to turn and run, to flee from this nightmare. But the man beside her, the one who had led her this far, gave her no choice. He stood silently, as if waiting for her to make the decision that had already been set in motion. She could hear her heart thumping in her chest. Each beat felt louder, more insistent, as if it were urging her to act, to do something. But what could she do? How could she step forward into the unknown when everything inside her screamed to run away? The door loomed before her, heavy and ominous, its metal surface smooth but cold, almost mocking her indecision. There was something about it, something that made her feel as though it wasn't just an ordinary door. It felt like a threshold, a boundary that once crossed, could never be undone. Once she walked through, she would be entering a place from which there was no returning. "You can't stand here forever," the man's voice broke the silence. His tone was steady, but there was an underlying urgency in it now. "You know what's at stake. You know what you have to do." Mia turned to look at him, her voice shaking. "I can't. I don't know what's behind that door. I don't know what will happen if I open it. I'm scared. I don't want to do this anymore." The man's expression softened, but only for a moment. He stepped closer to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've been scared this whole time, Mia. And yet, you've made it this far. You're stronger than you think. The truth on the other side of that door is your only chance to survive." She swallowed hard. Her throat felt tight, as if something was lodged there, choking her. But her mind wouldn't stop racing. What truth? What survival? What if the truth was too much for her to handle? What if it shattered everything she knew about herself, about her world? Was she ready for that? Was anyone ready for something like this? "You have no choice," the man added quietly, as if sensing her inner turmoil. "The truth is already inside you. It always has been. You just have to open your eyes to it." Mia's fingers twitched, and she instinctively reached out to touch the cold surface of the door. She flinched as her hand made contact, the chill of the metal sending a shiver through her body. A sense of inevitability washed over her, and she felt the weight of her decision pressing on her chest. She had come this far. Could she really back out now? Would she ever forgive herself if she did? She took a deep breath, her mind racing as she stared at the door. There was no going back. She had no choice but to push forward. If she stayed, she would forever wonder what was behind it. And if she ran, she would always feel the sting of regret. With trembling hands, she grasped the handle and turned it. The door creaked as it slowly opened, revealing a dark, cavernous room. It was vast and silent, the air thick with an almost tangible sense of foreboding. The walls were lined with strange symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. Mia's eyes strained to make sense of them, but they seemed to shift and change before her, as though they were alive. The man stepped forward, his movements purposeful, and Mia followed, despite the unease gnawing at her insides. She felt an overwhelming sense of displacement, as if the world had tilted on its axis, leaving her stranded in a place where nothing made sense. She was out of her depth, and for the first time, she wasn't sure if she could trust the man who had led her here. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "This is the place where all truths are revealed," the man replied. His voice held no warmth, only a cold certainty. "This is where you face the darkest parts of yourself, the parts that you've been running from your entire life." Mia shuddered at his words. She had known fear before, but this was different. It wasn't the kind of fear that made her look over her shoulder in the dark. It was the kind of fear that made her question everything, her identity, her choices, her past. "The truth?" she repeated, her voice shaky. "What truth?" "You'll understand soon enough," he replied, his tone distant. "But first, you need to see it for yourself. You need to face what's inside you." Mia didn't know what to expect, but nothing could have prepared her for what happened next. Suddenly, the room around her began to shift. The walls seemed to pulse, the symbols glowing brighter, casting eerie shadows that danced across the floor. The air grew colder still, and Mia could feel the weight of something unseen pressing against her chest. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps, and she instinctively backed away from the strange glow. "Stay calm," the man instructed, his voice unwavering. This is the first part of the truth. You need to face it. You need to accept what's coming. The floor beneath her feet began to vibrate, and Mia stumbled, almost falling to her knees. The shadows in the room twisted and writhed, taking on shapes that made her blood run cold. She recognized some of the forms, the faces of people she had known, people she had loved, but they were distorted, their expressions twisted in ways that made them unrecognizable. "Mia," the man said again, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You need to remember who you are. You need to hold on to yourself." But Mia couldn't. She couldn't hold on to anything in this nightmarish landscape. She was slipping, losing herself in the swirling mass of memories and faces, of pain and confusion. Everything she had ever known felt like it was falling apart. She wanted to scream, to beg for it all to stop, but the words wouldn't come. And then, in the midst of the turmoil, a figure appeared before her. It was a man, his face obscured by a dark hood. He stepped forward, his presence overwhelming, and Mia felt a strange pull, a connection she couldn't explain. "You've been running from this for too long, Mia," the man said, his voice low and haunting. "But now, you have no choice but to face it." Mia froze. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out and lifted the hood from his face. Mia gasped. The man standing before her wasn't a stranger at all. It was someone she had known, someone she had loved. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, everything else faded away. It was her father. She didn't know how it was possible, how he could be standing in front of her after everything that had happened. But there he was, as real as the room they were standing in, as real as the fear that gripped her heart. "You need to face the truth," he said again, his voice filled with an impossible sadness. "The truth about who you are. The truth about what's inside you." Mia's mind reeled. The truth? What truth? She had thought she was just a girl who had asked for help. She had thought she was just trying to survive. But now, as she stood in this strange, haunting place, she realized that nothing was simple. Everything was more complicated than she had ever imagined. Her father stepped closer, his eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "You've always had this inside you, Mia. You've always known it, even if you didn't want to admit it. The power, the darkness, the truth. It's all part of you." Tears welled in Mia's eyes as the weight of his words crushed her. She had spent her entire life trying to run from her past, from the darkness that had always lingered just out of reach. But now, it was here, staring her in the face. There was nowhere left to hide. "I don't understand," Mia whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know who I am anymore. What do you want from me?" Her father's face softened, and for a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of the man she remembered, the man who had once loved her. But then, just as quickly, that warmth vanished. "The truth will set you free, Mia," he said, his voice a mere echo in the dark. "But only if you can face it." The figure of her father slowly dissolved, his presence fading into the shadows. And with it, the room fell silent once again. The swirling images, the shifting symbols, the memories, they were all gone. The darkness was still there, but Mia felt different. Changed. She looked around, searching for the man who had brought her here. But he was gone. She was alone. Mia stood in the silence that had engulfed the room, her body frozen in place. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Everything she had learned so far, everything that had led her to this moment, seemed to swirl around her in a storm she couldn't control. The truth, her truth, was more than she could have ever imagined. She felt lost in it, adrift in a sea of confusion. But then, the voice spoke again. It wasn't the man who had led her here, nor was it the figure of her father. That had appeared and disappeared in the shadows. It was something different, something ancient. "It's time," the voice said, soft yet powerful, reverberating through the very walls of the room. "It's time for you to see what you've been running from." Mia's heart pounded in her chest as the air seemed to shift. It wasn't just the atmosphere around her that changed. She could feel something deeper within herself, something rising to the surface, something she had been too afraid to face. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath. It was as though the room had become alive, pulsating with energy that resonated through every fiber of her being. The memories of the past, the ones she had buried deep within her, began to surface, one by one, like an unstoppable flood. Her mind flashed to moments of her childhood, faces of people she had loved and lost, places she had once felt safe, moments of joy and laughter that were now tainted by the darkness of what she had discovered. She had always been told that the past didn't matter, that it was better to move on and forget. But now, everything from her past had collided with the present, and there was no escaping it. The room around her began to twist again, and she felt the ground beneath her feet tremble. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, their shapes shifting like living creatures, crawling toward her. She could hear whispers now, faint and barely audible, but unmistakable. They were her own whispers, her own thoughts, echoing through the darkness. "You've been afraid of the truth," the voice continued, softer now. "Afraid to face what lies within you. But now, there is no turning back." Mia's chest tightened as she finally understood. It wasn't just the mystery of her father's disappearance or the strange events that had led her here. It wasn't even the man who had guided her through the darkness. It was something more, something far more personal. It was the truth of who she really was. The whispers grew louder, as though the room itself was speaking to her, urging her to listen. And for the first time in her life, Mia stopped running. She stopped fighting the truth that had been hidden from her, buried deep within her soul. The truth wasn't just a secret about her past, nor was it about the people she had lost. It was about her, about what she was capable of. About the power she had denied for so long. "I can't do this," Mia whispered to herself, but the words felt hollow in the air. She could feel the shift within her, the rising tide of realization that had always been just out of reach. She wasn't just a victim. She wasn't just a girl who had been thrust into a world of uncertainty and darkness. She was more. Much more. The room shifted again, and this time, there was no escaping it. The walls seemed to close in on her, narrowing her focus until there was only one thing left, the man who had brought her here. He stood at the center of the room, watching her with an expression of quiet understanding. He had never told her everything, but now she realized that perhaps, he had never needed to. "You were always meant for this," he said, his voice steady, but laced with an emotion that Mia couldn't quite place. "You were always destined to face this moment, to unlock what was hidden inside you." Mia looked at him, her heart racing. "What am I supposed to do? I don't understand." "Why me?" The man's eyes softened. "Because you've always been stronger than you realized. Because you have the power to change everything. To break free from the cycle that has bound you for so long." Her head spun. Power. Change. She had always felt powerless, lost in a world that had never made sense to her. She had believed she was just like everyone else, a girl trying to survive. But now, standing here, she realized that she wasn't ordinary. She had something within her, something that had been dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The symbols on the walls flashed once more, their glow now blinding. Mia staggered, reaching for the wall to steady herself. She could feel the energy in the room, the surge of power that filled the space, enveloping her. It was like a pulse, beating in time with her own heart. And suddenly, it clicked. The truth that had been hidden from her, the truth about her father, about her past, about everything, wasn't just about what she had lost. It was about what she had been given. The power to change, to rewrite her story, to reclaim what was hers. The man stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. You need to take control now, Mia. It's time to reclaim your place in the world. She could hear the conviction in his voice, and for the first time, she believed him. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't lost. The key to her survival, to her future, was within her all along. And now, it was up to her to unlock it. But as the realization hit her, a new fear gripped her heart. What if it was too late? What if she had already lost too much? What if the power within her wasn't enough to change the course of events? You've been afraid of this, the man said, his voice now a steady reassurance. But it's the only way forward. You have to embrace who you are, Mia. Only then can you free yourself. Mia took a deep breath. She felt the weight of her past, the pain, the loss, but now it was no longer an anchor pulling her down. It was fuel, giving her the strength she needed to move forward. She had always felt like something was missing, like there was a part of her that she couldn't quite grasp. But now, in this moment, she realized that part of her had been within her the whole time. She stepped forward, her body steady, her resolve unshakable. The room around her seemed to shift one final time, and the symbols on the walls began to fade, their glow dimming. The air cleared, and the oppressive weight that had filled the space lifted. She was no longer afraid. The man stood beside her, watching her with quiet pride. "It's done," he said softly. "You've unlocked your truth." Mia's heart still raced, but now, it was filled with something new. Hope. Determination. And a deep understanding that she had the power to shape her own future. The journey had been long, and the road ahead would still be filled with challenges, but she was no longer alone. She was ready to face whatever came next. "I'm ready," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. The man nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "Then go. The world is waiting for you." As Mia turned and walked toward the door, she knew that her life had changed forever. The truth had set her free, not just from the past, but from the fear that had held her captive for so long. She had found herself again. And now, she was ready to live.